I'm Brad Barham, a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I teach economics and environmental issues. This video explores current efforts to sustain the grand bargain of historical cooperation and compromise among parties who decide how Colorado River water is managed and utilized. We'll identify those parties and share their perspectives using interviews we filmed with them in the summer of 2022. We begin with a brief review of the moment of reckoning described in the opening video. Thanks in large part to climate change, every year for more than 2 decades now, much more water was used than was available from the Colorado River Basin watersheds. Reserves that have been built up behind the 2 major dams, Glen Canyon and Hoover, have been drawn down, leaving Lake Powell and Lake Mead nearly depleted, approaching dead pool levels in which electricity generation and water flows that serve 40 million users are in peril.
You'll see a similar fact pattern in every major river basin. Hydrologic variability, hotter temperatures leading to earlier snowmelt, dry soils, all translating into earlier and low runoff.
In June of 2022, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner Camille Totten announced that there will be cuts of 2 to 4 million acre-feet, or 1/6 to 1/3 of previous annual water use, starting in 2023. Discussions are underway on how to achieve these cuts. Who are the players seated at the table at the Colorado River Basin policy discussions, and who are the inside players? These questions are complicated because there's not just a single room where the discussions take place. And there are insiders, outsiders, and stakeholders, some of whom have more money and power than the others have. Let's start with a formal view of who the lead players are. At the top, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, a federal agency within the Department of the Interior, is the coordinating authority for Colorado River policy and management. The Bureau controls the storage and conveyance of river water by the use of its many dams, reservoirs, and channels. For now, notice the government of Mexico sits to the side of the United States. Of the 2 national governments, they are the junior party. Mexico has legal claim to 10% of the water allotted under international treaties, and they sit at the bottom of the river. Below the feds are the 7 states, Arizona, California, and Nevada in the lower basin, and Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming in the upper basin.
Who's at the table? That's up to the states. Ultimately, it will be, I think, a very small group that hammers out the details. That seems to be the way things have worked on the river. That seems to be the way the world works.
Formally, these 7 states are the main decision makers under the 1922 Colorado River Compact, along with the feds. Below them are the water users, farmers, cities, tribes, environmental groups, scientists, and experts. The inner circle is actually larger. It includes reps from the 7 states, their 2 basin commissions, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation as a facilitator, and holders of senior water rights, also called present perfected rights because their water rights predate the 1922 Compact. We call them the big dogs. So here's a graphic of the big dogs and 5 other groups involved in the conversations. We talk more about these groups later, but notice some of the names we have given them. The historically excluded and omitted, never really in the game, not our fault, we're late bloomers, overseers, helpers, and everyone claims to be in this group, of course. Let's hear directly from the participants. We start with Bob Martin, a Bureau of Reclamation engineer at Glen Canyon Dam.
I oversee operations at Glen Canyon and then Flaming Gorge and Fontenelle.
The Bureau is the water master for the lower basin as they control water flows from Hoover Dam and the manager of the savings account at Glen Canyon.
And are you worried about reaching those dead pool levels? Are you pretty confident that they'll be able to pull the water from other points?
The thing about Lake Powell is it's a big bucket.
Yeah.
And there's no bigger buckets above Lake Powell. And this is the first year in 22 years of drought that we've reduced the withdrawal from Lake Powell from a 7.48 million acre feet, million acre foot release. So in every sense of the word, for the last 22 years, Glen Canyon has sheltered the lower basin from the drought. Mm-hmm. Their supply has not changed.
Each state has their own designated negotiating bodies, such as the Colorado River Authority of Utah, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and the recently formed Arizona Water Authority. All 7 states participate in either the Upper or Lower Basin commissions that represent the interests of each of the 2 basins within the Colorado River Compact. Next, we hear from Amy Ostdiek, the chief of the Interstate Federal and Water Information Section for the Colorado Water Conservation Board.
The whole goal behind the compact was to provide for the beneficial use of equal amounts of the river between the upper basin and the lower basin in perpetuity. So what that means is that between the upper and lower basin, there's not a priority on the system. We're meant to get equal shares, 7.5 to the upper basin and 7.5 to the lower basin. In reality, we all know that there has not been as much water in the river as there was believed to be 100 years ago. So while we continue with those same allocations and continue with legally equal shares of the river in terms of allocations, we have had to figure out how to live within the means of the river and to adjust our uses accordingly, which is something that I think we've done relatively well in the upper basin states.
Amy related the Upper Basin's water authority's view that they have managed water well and deserve their half share, not just the leftovers once the Lower Basin gets their 7.5 million acre feet. Next, we look at agricultural users, or farmers, who use 70 to 80% of the water in the river. In some cases, like in the Imperial Valley or nearby Yuma area, they have senior rights or first dibs to the water. We're featuring 3 farmers who work in vastly different climates and with different levels of water rights. We start with Ed Hale, a 3rd-generation farmer from the Imperial Valley who manages 8,500 acres and owns 6,500 acres of farmland. Most of his production is alfalfa, durum wheat, and other forage crops. Forage crops can be grown year-round in the desert with enough water.
As you know, there's a huge drought in the Colorado River Basin right now. What do you see as some potential solutions, and what do you think is going to happen moving forward?
Well, the truth is, water usually follows money. I mean, if you want to be a realist, obviously we've got to be as watertight as we can be. We do have an imbalance in the amount of water that's allocated and the amount of water that's available. There are a lot of things that we can do. We're doing many of them. We need to do more. We have some programs that are being tried in other areas, and here where we have a water conservation program where we provide water to our thirsty coastal plain neighbors by putting in extraordinary conservation measures that would be more than a farm could ordinarily pay for. And the grand bargain is that they would pay for those conservation measures. In turn, they get the water that's saved, and we continue to be able to produce the food and fiber that we've always produced.
Dan Thielander explained evolving water rights for farmers along the Central Arizona Project, or CAP, a diversion canal that has junior rights to California and on which Arizona cities generally have more sway than farmers do to draw on the Colorado River.
Our farm is in the Maricopa-Stanfield Irrigation Drainage District, and for many years we've received a combination of Central Arizona Project water as well as groundwater. And our farm is called Tempe Farming Company because we started farming in the Tempe area. Yeah. My dad did back in 1960, and this is in the Salt River Project. So I grew up with plentiful supply of irrigation water and really inexpensive. Salt River Project being the oldest reclamation project in the nation.
Like Dan, Paul's family story features moving their ranch to the western slope of the Rockies to make way for suburban development and then getting active to figure out how to secure water and farm effectively in a location where their water rights were tenuous and the growing season short.
I'm the 5th generation of the Bruchet family to farm and ranch in the state of Colorado. We're front range. We had some irrigation rights, but most of our business down there was dryland wheat farming. I was young enough growing up that I was very involved, but we're talking middle school, high school kid, involved in the ag business. The city kind of grew around us, became pretty hard to operate. We looked to relocate. We did in the year 2000, came up here to Kremling. So the family ranch is right here in the headwaters, just below the confluence of the Williams Fork River and above the confluence of the Blue River. about 5 or 6 miles to the east of Kremling. My dad had an idea back then that he could be pretty creative in what he would do with water. And so we basically moved to a place on the main stem of the Colorado River where we thought water was abundant, and we found ourselves in a water scarce scenario pretty fast. But we had a meeting in 2003 at the end of operation season where we basically said that we moved to the wrong place. And so it's either time to get incredibly involved and proactive, or we need to relocate. And the parents said, we're going to get involved and figure this out.
Paul has become a leader in adaptive management, especially in developing best practices for rotational fallowing of agricultural land, a topic we'll come back to later in our video. Commercial white farmers are big players in the Colorado River Basin, yet they don't all have senior rights to the water, so they are by no means monolithic in their power. That's why we call some big dogs, others not so much with respect to water rights. They are also not the only farmers in the basin. In this next clip, Darryl Vigil, water administrator for the Jicarilla Apache Nation and former chairman of the 10 Tribes Partnership, highlights the agricultural role of the 22 federally recognized tribes with quantified water diversion rights in the Colorado River Basin, and he calls for inclusion of the tribes that still have unsettled water claims.
What is the importance of, tribes being, at the policy table or being involved in the conversation? And it's, it's on a bunch of different levels, but one of them is sustainability. You have the conversation about, especially from my Pueblo side, thousands of years of sustainable integrated living in terms of, how we've looked and fit into nature and lived a spiritual existence compared to the management of the current system and the experiment of the United States, which is just roughly 200 years old. We're saying that, hey, there's probably something, if we commonly value the river and its resources, that we can learn from each other and that you can absolutely learn from tribes in terms of the sustainability of that river.
One thing to add to Darryl's remarks is that because the 1922 Colorado River Compact explicitly divides water management between upper and lower basin states, to this day tribes have no formal role in the ongoing negotiations within that inner circle. That said, we found all parties calling for them to be brought more deeply into deliberations. As Carrie Dale highlights, many urban areas are highly dependent on the Colorado River.
Well, welcome to Oceanside. We're really proud to show off our newest facility here. This is a map of California. It shows where we're getting our water supplies right now. And the water supplies that we're using in the city and have used for many, many years come from hundreds of miles away. You may be familiar with the Sacramento Bay Delta up in the San Francisco area. That is the State Water Project. The deliveries coming from that area are at 0% right now because of habitat considerations. So for us, it's not a very reliable supply. Our other source of water is the Colorado River Basin, and that's where the majority of the water used in San Diego County comes from.
They are represented by local water agencies like the San Diego County Water Authority, the City of Phoenix Water Services Department, and the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. For many reasons, cities are very powerful actors. The Met is the strongest with the most senior rights to water, so it's definitely a big dog. Other water users or decision makers include environmental groups who typically advocate for better water quality, water conservation, and habitat restoration. Here, Zach Frankel, Executive Director of Utah River Council, calls for a collaborative decision-making process with all concerned at the table.
When we decide things behind closed doors, we tend to anger constituents, and it leads to litigation and revisions and a lot of wasted time and energy. So it would be a mistake to view the decision making out of the Colorado River as punitive, and it should be those guys that we target and we take away their water. That's a mistake. The collaborative process is where we have the most hope for our shared future in the face of this climate change crisis.
Here is a lawyer who has served at a high level in the Obama administration, commenting on the federal government's role, particularly that of the Bureau of Reclamation, in driving the states towards collaboration through the threat of federal action.
One of the things that the paper that John Fleck and I wrote pointed out was that past successful negotiations that led to significant agreements around river operations have always included some sort of federal threat or directive that created additional motivation on the part of the basin states to work things out. We're seeing that again right now. As we're speaking, there's a hearing going on in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee where the Commissioner of Reclamation, Camille Touton, is testifying. She was asked if the states are not able to agree, would Reclamation take action? And she said yes. She said Reclamation will act to protect the system.
Our last stakeholders are our recreational businesses and areas, though these participants don't necessarily consume the water. Energy producers, including hydroelectric dams, but also other water-using energy technologies. So who really makes the decisions? Recall that Gene Showcroft told us that the Grand Bargain Inner Circle includes a small group that consists of representatives from the 7 states, their 2 basin commissions, and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation as facilitator. We add to that inner circle the holders of senior water rights, also called present perfected rights, because they predate the compact agreements. And we call them the big dogs, the Imperial Irrigation District, Yuma, and Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Historically, major changes in water policy depend on their cooperation because they have the legal rights to claim water before all other users. Let's return to Mexico and the United States for a moment. There are trans-boundary coordination efforts made both within the U.S. compact discussions and in parallel to them. Stakeholders on both sides of the border are pictured on the left and right of the center circle. They are the same as discussed above: federal agencies, basin states, water users, and the like. Binational work groups focus on the Sea of Cortez and the ecosystems once nourished there by the inflows of the Colorado River. High-level policy groups meet with mixes of stakeholders to discuss options. 2 small insider dogs with present perfected rights are Coachella Valley Water District and Palo Verde Water Districts. Perhaps the San Diego Water Authority is a medium outsider dog that could also make some noise based on its quantification agreement for water transfer with the Imperial Irrigation District.
California is in a mega drought. Water supplies are limited across the West. With conservation and smart investments, San Diego will have dependable water supplies, rain or shine.
We named several other categories of stakeholders to the Grand Bargain, recognizing that some could be placed in more than one group. One we identify as a historically screwed over based on junior and unrealized water rights. Included in this group are tribes, Mexico, Central Arizona farmers, and others. Another group is the never-in-the-game set of states who have small, late claims, specifically New Mexico and Wyoming. A third who say it's not our fault, we're late bloomers, but we'd like to grow, include Colorado Front Range, Utah farms, and urban users, and the like. A fourth group are the overseers and historical problem solvers, specifically the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, Army Corps of Engineers, and Department of Interior. And last is the fifth group we call the helpers, and that might include Las Vegas and the Southern Nevada Water Authority that have advanced conservation efforts further than the rest. Could include GRIC, the Gila River Indian community that has used, leased, and saved water in Lake Mead after 100 years of waiting to get it. Then there are the Colorado River Indian tribes who are requesting to lease and exchange water and have also been saving water in Lake Mead.
Sort of ask you to define what you like, what you work on, and
so with the help of those we interviewed, we've tried in this video to set the stage for the Grand Bargain by introducing you to the players. In the next video, we consider what all of this might mean for managing the Colorado River crisis in 2023 and beyond.